It was the stillness of night that blanketed the city of Madina, when most souls had drifted into the silence of sleep. But in the calm darkness, there was one soul still awake, a soul always restless in the service of others. He moved slowly through the alleys, careful not to make noise. Draped in a simple cloth, wearing sandals worn from years of service, a heavy sack of flour rested on his back, along with a few dates and oil. Anyone who passed by might assume him to be an ordinary man delivering food. But he was far from ordinary. He was Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the husband of Fatima, the father of Hussain and Hussain, the gate of knowledge, the sword of justice. Yet tonight, he was none of those things. He was simply a servant of Allah, seeking the hungry, the broken, and the forgotten. Why carry the food himself? Why walk alone in the shadows, when he could send 10 servants in daylight? Because sincerity dies in the spotlight. Because the worth of charity is not in what is given, but how it is given, because he gave not from his hand, but from his heart. As he reached the poor district of Madina, he slowed down near a small, crumbling house. A dim light flickered inside. From within, he heard the soft cries of children, voices muffled, but full of pain. A woman's voice tried to calm them, though her own tone trembled with exhaustion. He knocked gently on the door. "Who is it?" came a tired, guarded voice. "Servant of Allah," he replied humbly. "I have brought you something to ease your night." There was silence, then the sound of the door creaking open. A woman appeared, her face pale, eyes hollow from sleeplessness, lips chapped from hunger. Behind her, small figures stirred, children who looked too weak to cry any louder. The man standing at her doorstep had no name to offer, no pride to show, only warmth, sincerity, and food. "You must have made a mistake," the woman said. "We have no family, no one to care for us." "I know," he replied, "but Allah sees you, and I am only his means." He entered without permission, not out of arrogance, but out of urgency. The children had not eaten for days. The woman, a widow whose husband had died in one of the early battles, had no income, no relatives, and no hope left. Her complaints had reached no one. Her tears were seen by no ruler. She looked at the stranger, his back bent from carrying the sack, his hands steady as he set the flour, dates, and oil down. "Where is Ali?" she muttered in frustration. "Isn't he the leader of the believers? Isn't he responsible for us? Where is he now, when my children cry themselves to sleep each night?" He said nothing. His heart clenched. He was Ali, the same man she was questioning. But tonight was not about name or position. It was about duty. He did not defend himself. He did not reveal who he was. Instead, he bent down, lit a small fire in the corner of the room, and began to cook. He kneaded the dough, poured the oil, and prepared a simple meal from what he had brought. The children, who had been crying moments ago, now sat up with curiosity. Their eyes widened with joy at the smell of warm bread. He broke the bread into pieces and fed them with his own hands, smiling, comforting, speaking gently. He blew softly on each bite to cool it, feeding the smallest child first. They giggled. He smiled, and Allah was watching. He cleaned the dishes, swept the small room with his own sleeves, and helped put the children to sleep. When they closed their eyes peacefully, full and satisfied, he looked at the mother. "May Allah ease your burden," he said. If you ever need anything, ask him, for he never turns away the hand raised to him." The woman was in tears. "May Allah bless you, stranger. No one has ever shown us such kindness." He turned to leave. "Wait," she said. "What is your name?" He paused. "I am the servant of the one who never sleeps." And he walked into the night. That night Ali did not sleep. Not out of pain, but out of reflection. He knew there were hundreds more like that woman. He had chosen the weight of the Ummah on his shoulders, not for honor, but for responsibility. Every tear shed in the corners of the city, he counted it his failure. Every stomach that slept empty, he bore that pain silently. He didn't want praise. He wanted justice, and justice, he knew, begins where no one is watching. The next morning, as the sun rose over Madinah, the woman stood outside her home, holding her children's hands. The food had brought them to life. They were smiling, laughing, chasing each other in the dust. Suddenly she saw a group of people walking toward the mosque. In their midst was a man of noble posture, strong arms, a calm and powerful face. "That's the commander of the faithful," someone whispered beside her. She turned to look, and her heart dropped. It was him. The stranger, the one who had carried flour, the one who had fed her children. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had blamed him the night before, cursed him in her pain. And he had responded, not with anger, not with words, but with food, with kindness, with humility. She wanted to run to him and ask for forgiveness, but her feet would not move. In the mosque, Imam Ali sat quietly beside the Prophet's pulpit, eyes lowered in remembrance. His face bore no signs of pride, only peace. News of his secret nightly acts began to spread over time. It was said he would often carry food on his back, visit the orphans, clean their homes, and leave without a trace. One night someone tried to follow him in secret to see where he went, but he disappeared into the shadows. Another time a young man tried to take the sack from his back, saying, "O Commander of the Faithful, let me carry this." Ali smiled and said, "Will you carry my burden on the day of judgment, too?" The man stepped back. Ashamed. The people of Madinah began to notice that whenever a poor family was fed during the night, or a widow found food at her door, there was no name, no signature, only mercy. And it was after the martyrdom of Imam Ali, when the city lost its light, that these secret acts stopped. That's when they realized he was the one, all along, the unknown helper, the silent savior, the one who never needed recognition, only the pleasure of Allah. As the believers washed his body, tears filled their eyes, not only for the man they had lost, but for the hidden love they had only just begun to understand. And in the words of the Koran, his charity had already been recorded. They give food out of love for him, to the needy, the orphan, and the prisoner, saying, "We feed you only for the sake of Allah. We do not seek from you reward or thanks." The air in Madinah had changed. It wasn't just the passing of a man. It was the fading of a lantern that had guided the Ummah quietly in its darkest hours. After Imam Ali's martyrdom, whispers spread across alleyways, inside homes, and among the orphans. Who will come now? The woman whose children had once slept hungry until that nameless stranger came, now stood in sorrow at her doorway each night. She would light a lamp just in case, perhaps, maybe, he would return, but the footsteps never came again. It was only when the city learned of his death that her eyes were truly opened. The hands that had kneaded dough in her kitchen were the same that lifted the gate of Karbala. The voice that comforted her children had once echoed verses of divine truth. The man she had doubted in her pain was the one who never turned away in anyone else's. Yet the story did not end there. It was the legacy of his actions, silent, humble, and pure, that began to awaken others. His children, his students, and even his enemies could no longer ignore the unmatched compassion that had defined his soul. One evening, Imam Hussain sat in the mosque of Kufa. His face was dignified yet weighed by sorrow. Around him were people, still confused, still grieving, still wondering how a man so noble could be killed in a place of prayer, in the very Saida that was his connection to the divine. A man from the gathering stood up and asked, "O son of the commander of the faithful, how could such a man be struck in sujud? Why didn't he defend himself?" Imam Hussain looked up with eyes that bore the ocean of knowledge. "He did not raise his hand," he said, "because the one who raised the sword was already dead inside. My father would never strike a man whose soul had long left righteousness." Then he paused and added, "You ask why he didn't protect himself. Tell me, how does a candle defend itself from the wind?" The crowd fell silent. It was in these moments that people began to remember what they had overlooked. In one of the poorer areas of Kufa, a group of orphans gathered every evening. For years a man would come, play with them, tell them stories of courage and faith, bring them food, comb their hair, and hug them like a father. One night they sat waiting. Then 2 nights. Then 3. He never returned. A young girl among them, not more than 6 years old, stood and said softly, "Maybe he went to find food for more children." But a woman nearby was crying. "No, child," she whispered. "He has gone to meet the one he served." The girl didn't fully understand, but she looked at the sky, then at the small bread in her hand, and kissed it. "Thank you, Baba," she whispered. "We will share this, like you taught us." This was Imam Ali's legacy. He did not leave behind wealth or land. He left behind values, souls, a rhythm of justice and mercy that continued to echo in the actions of those who truly loved him. Years before his martyrdom, one night while walking in the streets of Kufa, a servant of the treasury saw Imam Ali carrying a heavy load on his back, as he often did. Shocked, he ran to him and said, "O commander of the faithful, let me carry this for you." Ali refused. "No." "But why, master?" "You are the leader of the believers." He looked him in the eyes and said, "On the day of judgment, who will carry my burden, you?" The servant froze. Imam Ali continued walking into the slums, knocking on doors silently. He would not only deliver food, he would sit and talk with the lonely, listen to the elderly, wipe the tears of grieving mothers. Sometimes he would change the oil of a widow's lamp, or repair the toy of a child. Once he sat an entire night with a blind old man who had no one to speak to. No books recorded these deeds. No historians praised them in the moment, but the heavens recorded each one. That same old man, after learning of Ali's death, refused to eat for 3 days. "He was my eyes," he kept repeating. Now the night is darker than ever. One day a Jewish man came to the court in Kufa, claiming someone had stolen his armor. Imam Ali was the caliph. The man did not know the defendant was Ali himself. Ali stood before the judge, not on the throne, but equal to the accuser, The judge said, "Oh, Ali, do you have proof the armor is yours?" He replied, "No, I do not." The judge ruled in favor of the Jewish man. Ali accepted it without argument, without using his authority, that the Jewish man's hands trembled. He looked at Ali and said, "You are the caliph, and you accepted a judgment against yourself?" Ali nodded. "Because that is justice." The man wept. "Your religion must be the truth," he said. And he embraced Islam then and there. Even in the battlefield, Ali's justice and compassion never left him dot in the Battle of Siffin. One of his enemies lay wounded, thirsty, and crying out for help. Imam Ali walked to him, held his head, and offered him water. When the man asked, "Why help me? I came to kill you," Ali responded gently, "You came to kill, Ali. I came to serve humanity." And his final days, when the sword struck him in Saida, his blood mixed with the dust of the mosque. But even in that pain, his words were not curses. They were remembrance of Al-Adat. His sons Hussain and Hussain rushed to his side. He looked at them with love and said, "Be kind to your enemies. Feed even the one who struck me. He is a human being lost in darkness. He left this world as he lived in it, with humility, mercy, and complete trust in Al-Adat, and yet, despite his greatness, he never considered himself above anyone." Once a man praised him in a public gathering. Ali interrupted and said, "I am less than what you say, but more than what you know." That was his essence, neither proud of praise nor afraid of truth. He used to say, "Do not be a slave to others, for Allah created you free." In the years that followed his passing, the city began to rot with leaders who wore crowns but lacked souls. People remembered the simplicity of Imam Ali, his torn clothes, his modest home, the stale bread he ate, the water he carried himself, and the nights he spent awake, not in palaces, but in alleyways, at the feet of the forgotten. Even today, there are those who still taste the warmth of his silence, the power of his humility, the strength in his soft words. His name is written in books, but his love is carved in hearts. One day, Imam Hussain sat beside a young orphan who had lost his parents in a recent battle. The boy was quiet, staring at a loaf of dry bread in his hand. "Why don't you eat, child?" Hussain asked. The boy said, "My father told me not to eat until I share with my brother." "Do you have a brother?" "No," he whispered, "but the man who fed me every night told me I am not alone." Imam Hussain gently placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered, "That man was my father. You will never be alone again." The house where Imam Ali once fed the hungry children became a small gathering place. People would come and sit quietly, not to speak, but to feel, to remember the night the unseen hands brought food, the unknown feet cleaned the floor, the unspoken kindness that made the poor feel rich in dignity. The woman who once asked, "Where is Ali?" would now tell her children every night, "Ali came. He came when no one else did. And now we must be like him." The revelation and the true meaning of leadership as dawn gently embraced the city of Kufa. A golden hue spread over the mud brick homes, calling its people to another day of toil, worship, and reflection. The humble family who had received the unexpected help the night before awoke to the sweet aroma of warm bread. For the first time in weeks their stomachs weren't aching with hunger, and their hearts pulsed with renewed strength. yet their minds were filled with wonder. Who was the man who had appeared in the night like a shadow of mercy and disappeared just as quietly? The father gathered his children and wife around him, each face glowing with gratitude and curiosity. "We must go and thank him," he said with resolve. "A kindness like this deserves not just prayer, but also personal gratitude." But their search began without any direction. They had no name, no clue. The children described his glowing eyes, his gentle hands, and the way he placed each item carefully, almost with reverence. Yet these words were not enough to trace him. Days passed, and news began to spread across the city, not about the hungry family, but about the caliph. Imam Ali had not shown up in court the morning after the stormy night. It was unlike him. People whispered, wondering if he had fallen ill. Some worried, while others simply grew more curious. The city's judge, Qadi Shure, went to visit him. He found the commander of the faithful tending to his own modest wounds, the muscles of his back strained from heavy lifting, his hands marked with shallow cuts. "My lord, what happened?" the Qadi asked. Imam Ali smiled gently, not answering. "Directly. Sometimes a leader must know the weight of flour and feel the cold of the street." The Qadi understood there was more behind those words, but Imam Ali remained silent, returning to his routine. His humility was not a show. It was his essence. Meanwhile, the poor family began noticing small signs throughout the city. A shopkeeper mentioned a man buying food late at night. A child described someone carrying sacks toward the outer neighborhood. Piece by piece, like fragments of a dream, they began stitching together a possibility they could barely accept. One afternoon, as they entered the mosque for prayers, the children stopped. The youngest whispered, "That's him," pointing to the man on the prayer mat, head bowed in sujud. The father hesitated. "That cannot be. That is the caliph. That is Imam Ali." But as they stood frozen, the man finished his prayer and rose. When he turned, the calm and luminous face confirmed it. It was him. The family approached with awe, falling to their knees. "Ya Amir al-Mu'minin," the father exclaimed, tears flowing. "Why did you help us like that? You are our leader. You could have sent someone. Why did you carry those sacks? With your own hands?" Imam Ali placed his hands on their shoulders, helping them to stand. "Because," he said softly, "on the day of judgment it will be my shoulders that are questioned. It is my hands that must not be stained with the cries of the hungry." The story spread across Kufa, not by the Imam's wish, but because sincerity cannot be hidden. It burns through veils of modesty and inspires hearts. One evening, his companion, Kamel ibn Ziyad, sat beside him and asked, "Why do you never let your identity be known when you give? People would love you even more." Imam Ali looked at the stars above. "I do not want love that is built on reputation. I want love that leads people to God, not to me. If they see an old man feeding the poor, maybe they will remember how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, fed the orphans with his own blessed hands." Kamel was silent, humbled. These weren't just words, they were principles. They were truth in action. As weeks passed, more families came forward. One told how a man had helped rebuild their broken door. Another described how an unknown visitor had paid their debts. Slowly it became clear. Many in Kufa had been touched by the hands of the caliph without ever knowing it. it wasn't just. The hungry he helped. He sat with the widows, cleaned the wounds of injured workers, taught the orphans how to read and recite the Koran, and visited the sick in the darkest corners of the city where others dared not enter. And yet in court he was firm, in battle unshaken, in knowledge unmatched. Those who knew him as a warrior couldn't imagine him weeping beside a sick child. Those who knew him as a mystic couldn't fathom him lifting sacks of flour for the poor. But he was all this and more. Imam Ali was a full embodiment of justice, tenderness, and truth. One day, a man asked him, "Ya Ali, what is the essence of leadership?" He replied, "It is to eat only when your people are fed, to sleep only when their fears are calmed, to love them more than they love you, and to be forgotten as long as their Lord remembers them." The hungry family, now better off, began spending their days serving others. The children grew up hearing not just the stories of the battlefields, but of the silent nights their leader walked barefoot through the city. It shaped their character, gave them purpose. Years later, one of the sons became a teacher. When his students asked him who taught him the meaning of charity, he would smile and say, "A man who gave with such humility, I only knew his name days later, and that name ... was Ali." As time moved on, the world turned and leaders came and went. But in the hearts of the people of Kufa, the image of Imam Ali, carrying sacks in the rain, whispering prayers as he knocked on doors, remained etched forever. And long after the dust had settled, when generations recalled what true leadership meant, they did not speak of thrones, armies, or gold. They spoke of that quiet night when the caliph became a servant, when justice didn't wear a crown but a patched cloak, when the sword of the mighty rested so that the hungry could sleep in peace. They remembered a man who ruled with love, led with light, and taught that the true crown is worn on the soul, not the head. That man was Imam Ali, and through his example, the world learned that leadership is not power over people, it is service to them.